Thank you very much. And this brings us to the last panel of the day. And it's a pleasure to call my friend, Kenan, who is also the VP Content at Cytactic. It's an opportunity to thank Ido, who put together the simulation also earlier. He did all the research and analysis of the simulation. And to bring on stage with him for a discussion about lesson learned from cyber crisis, David Cox, who is the head of European Cyber Resilience Center for Mastercard, Gilad Weitman, who is the COO of Cyberbit, and Paul Tumelty, who is the regional consulting leader at Mandiant Cloud, Google Cloud.
So do I operate it from the remote? Okay. Hi. So what we're going to talk about today is actual dilemmas in cyber crises and the different ideas and thoughts and what we can learn from them. And let's start. Just feel free to chime in. So there was this attack not so long ago on the NHS. It was actually a supply chain attack on Advanced, a company that is a third-party vendor, giving them providing a lot of digital services. And once the company was attacked, ransomware, they shut down the services, and the NHS was brought to its knees. It couldn't. Doctors couldn't update the medical files. People couldn't call the emergency lines. Everything turned to paper, to Word documents sent by email. And it caused pileups, estimated at months of extra work of having to fix and update all the databases after the ransomware was after the problem was solved and the systems were back up. So I'm thinking about a cyber business continuity plan, which the NHS seemed to not have a very good one, which is weird because just 5 years prior, NHS was one of the many organizations attacked by the WannaCry ransomware attack, and they should have learned a lesson. So let's hear you.
Yeah, I'll crack on. I don't know whether you can hear me very well. Let me take that out, it's probably better. So I worked in law enforcement when this actually happened in the original one in WannaCry. I worked for the National Crime Agency and the National Cybercrime Unit. And yeah, you're right, it was a real surprise that 5 years on, they didn't seem to go through the lessons learned that they should have at the time that had happened. What they went through was pretty much exactly the same, although it was a third-party supplier rather than themselves. But they didn't take any learnings from that. They didn't, what it seems, or if they did, they may not have had the time to implement it. I suppose we could be a little bit kind in that, but 5 years is a long time. But, you know, you need to, and it's been said a lot already, you need to tabletop exercise. You need to plan. Plans are nothing. Planning is everything. So you can't just get your plan, put it in the drawer, forget about it. You need to continually look at it, continually do something about it. And I don't think it happened on this occasion. I don't know, Gilad, whether you want to.
So we don't want to badmouth the British, but Royal Mail had a similar attack that also caused a lot of delays in international mail. And it seems like a lot of big government or governmental organizations are not prepared for what cyber attacks might cause to them and how critical or how devastating they could be.
Well, they're a huge beast. They're a very difficult thing to manage, very difficult thing to move around and move that tanker around. But yeah, we get a lot of British bashing, and that's fine. But yeah, we need to be a little bit quicker.
We'll get to the Americans soon.
Lovely.
All right. Thank you for that, David. I actually wanted to talk a little bit more about the SOC and the incident response team.
Just closer.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I wanted actually to talk a little bit about the incident response team and the SOC professionals themselves, because obviously in business continuity, situation like here, we're talking about the playbooks, about the management, the decision that they took, but it's a lot about how the SOC team and the professionals in the SOC are actually reacting to a situation like that. So what we're doing with upskilling of cybersecurity professionals, we're letting them actually experience real ransomware attack. And what's happening in this situation like that is that when we put people in front of a PowerShell to try and understand how the ransomware is actually propagating, that they need now to see the encryption, they need now to see how things are propagating, they need to escalate the right thing to the right management, suddenly their eyes are open and they suddenly understand the situation all over again. And I think one of the panelists before me talked about the importance of training and the fact that it should be repetitive. That's a very important point, because when we do that, time after time, at least once a quarter, we see that people are starting to develop their muscle memory, which is really, really critical. And maybe the last point I wanted to mention here, and then I'll pass over to you, is the point that was mentioned also in one of the previous presentations, which is third party. The supply chain is a very, very critical thing here. Many people, when they are coming and are trying to investigate attacks like ransomware, they just automatically exonerate third-party tools. It's signed, it's from a well-known and trusted vendor, we can just let it go, but that's not the case. We're trying to make sure that in all those trainings that we do, people suspect everything, unless they really find that nothing is suspected. Even those third-party files, even those trusted vendors, everything could be a penetration vector as initial access in the MITRE attack framework.
Thank you, Gilad. Paul?
Yeah, so the third-party supplier issues obviously come to the fore again recently with MoveIt. If you've not heard of MoveIt, you better check quickly whether they've got your data. So again, I'm from Mandiant, so we do about 1,000 investigations a year, and it's very common to see organisations lack an understanding of what their dependencies are on third-party suppliers. And I think the advanced case you mentioned that affected the UK Health Service is a good case in point, company that people might not have heard of, but actually providing critical services to a national healthcare provider. So again, it's quite common for us to see and hear about these companies which are fairly obscure, but they have huge disruptive impact on the wider sector.
I think one of the important things is as well that third-party management isn't just the once a year, send your survey out, get it back, and we've ticked that box and everything's fine. It's a constantly evolving thing. You need to be on it all the time. It's something that moves very, very quickly, and you need to be able to move quickly with it.
And what we've learned in Cytactic is that you have to make sure your suppliers are as protected as you are, or they allow you to check their systems. And also, once you have a crisis, once you have an attack, they have to give you access to the information, because we know of companies that were like, oh, I'm a third party, but this is my problem, not yours, and you're not getting into it. And then you have to face your clients and users and say, I'm sorry, I don't know anything. City of Oakland, California, a very large PII data leak, private information, and this was a ransomware attack. They stole a lot of information about employees, about citizens, people who asked the city for any form that you would send, and also secret police files. The hackers asked for money, didn't get it, and started leaking the information. Soon after, there was a class action suit issued by a cop, actually, a police officer who was an employee of the city, and she said they didn't protect the information. They kept the information they didn't need to. They didn't tell us, didn't give us information in time, and all the information that is necessary. And identity theft is a very big thing in the United States. So we're looking at the data leak and its effects on a company or organization.
Sure, yeah. So, over the years, ransomware actors have grown in maturity, I think. So What we're seeing more and more of now is, they'll get inside your network, they need access, they need credentials, they need connectivity. And so what they're doing is getting inside the network, lurking around, moving around a bit, and trying to identify your critical assets. Quite a lot of organizations don't know what their critical assets are, but obviously PII is absolutely key for most organizations. So PII is a top target for ransomware groups. And what we've seen is they will try to start heaping pressure on an organization by posting data to shaming sites to say, look, here's a sample of the data we've extracted from your environment. If you don't start negotiating with us, then there'll be further data releases. And so it's very common for organizations not really to understand their attack surface, and they need to minimize those threat vectors to prevent ransomware actors extracting that PII.
Yeah, I think this specific case is very interesting because it is a classic case of double extortion. While the people who are focusing on the ransomware in the SOC room, in the management, whatever little they did try to manage it, they didn't even notice until too late that data was being exfiltrated and sensitive data. And so this is again going back to the importance on training on real reverse malware coming from the wild, trying to be ready for all those specific and unique cases. I think another point that is maybe worth mentioning is the fact that you mentioned, Dido, that actually the police sued their own city. This is not something that you can see every day. And there were two different faults here. First of all, they weren't ready. Although they were warned, they didn't prepare themselves. But the second thing, which was also a reason for that suit, was that they didn't communicate what's going on. They actually tried to conceal the fact that the data was leaked, and that even made things worse.
Just leading on from what Gilad said there, there was a known vulnerability within the system that they didn't patch, and that's so key. I lead for the European Central Bank on their cyber intelligence sharing initiative. One of the things that I did was survey members as to what keeps them awake at night, and we came back with a list of things, and then from that we mapped it to the CIS framework, and we can see that 70% of you can protect yourself against 70% of the attacks out there, or 70% of the vectors that are out there, if you just use 20 common controls, and some of those are really easy to employ and bang for buck. It's a really easy thing to do. Just wasn't done in this case, and they didn't look after their jewels. They didn't probably segment their systems. They didn't do everything that they should have done.
Information on this hack went back to 2005, meaning that the city possibly kept information it wasn't required to keep. And this is a good lesson for data retention. Keep the data you need, throw away the data you don't, because somebody might get their hands on it. At least keep it encrypted and offline if you really want to keep records. Ataf Dating, Israeli website for LGBT dating. It was hacked. Information was stolen and leaked after the hackers did not receive their $1 million ransom demand. And the Israeli courts issued a warrant to remove websites or remove information from websites. And the Israeli Privacy Protection Authority opened an investigation into possibly faulty cyber defenses that the company had, and ordered an indefinite suspension of the website, which to this day says that it will be back soon, but probably not. And this is compliance, how you comply with regulation and rules and laws that determine how you have to operate when you have such sensitive information.
So I think this is also similar to what you just described in the previous case. That organization need to make sure that they are classifying all the data that they have. They don't keep what they don't need to keep. And what they keep, they understand what is important and what is not. It's not only how do you protect it, it's actually also where you store it. Do you store it on-prem? Do you store it on the cloud? In this case, I think it was on a third-party on-prem installation. And for each one of those cases, you need to make sure that you are fully protected. And then, of course, there is the issue of the data exfiltration itself. Going back to the SOC and IR teams, they need to really be trained on all the various techniques of data exfiltration, because at the end of the day, as precaution as you can take, data exfiltration may happen. And the team really need to be ready, work on all those different data exfiltration techniques, and also train on the OWASP top 10, because web security is also an important aspect here.
Nothing to add. We'll go on. Red Bank. This was a very interesting story with Lazarus again. Referenced, attributed. This was a hack where spear phishing was done on an employee of Red Bank, which runs the network of ATMs in Chile, over 3,000 machines. And this employee got a message on LinkedIn, we have a job for you. He even had a video chat with the executive from the company, which was later found out to be fake, to be an actor, who spoke to him, who interviewed him in Spanish. And he said, can you please install this software that allows you to give your CV in PDF format? He installed it, and this was their way into the bank, into the network. They wanted to, they're assumed to have tried to do a fast cash attack, which is stealing money digitally and then removing it physically from ATMs before anything can be fixed. This is something they've done in several other cases. The most famous is the Lazarus heist. And this is cyber defense training for employees. Don't fall for phishing.
I'll take that to start off with. Employee awareness is absolutely key. We do that very regularly at Mastercard. And one thing that we try to instill in our employees is, do I know you like that? Do I know you so much to then install some software? And if I don't, do you know what? I'm not going to do it. I'm trying to do that by making our training a little bit fun. Some people say it actually is a little bit fun, which is weird.
I don't have to listen to you. I don't have to do what you're telling me. So what? You're CEO. Maybe it's not you. I'm not doing what you're telling me. Okay?
Exactly. I don't know you like that. And something that we did when we first started the phishing training, what we were doing, we used to go around, and if somebody had taken the bait, we used to put a little fish on their desk in a little bowl, not a real one. We used to put it on their desk, and then quickly we ran out of fish in bowls. And it was like, what do we do now? Well, we need to change it and do something else. But it kind of got the message home, and people started listening to it. People started doing more, and actually taking it into their home life rather than just at work is really important.
Workplace shaming. You've heard it here first.
Yeah, and I think that example is a good one because it shows you the lengths the attackers will go to as well. And that's increasingly it's an important point to note, that the attackers got time, whereas you as the organisation don't. And one of the key factors, the key stresses during any cyber crisis is, you're up against the clock. There's huge pressure on the organisation at the board level, so you need to act quickly. So the attackers are increasingly sort of adapting their techniques to more advanced detection tooling. So phishing is becoming harder and harder for the attackers, and therefore they're going to greater lengths to work their way around that.
It's interesting because Lazarus Group in particular really do create attacks that take a very long time. Like we saw in the simulation, the file that was corrupted, that was infected, it was about 2 years before the final attack happened, and this is something that you usually don't see. You see hackers going in, checking around, and then starting to infiltrate, to steal, to do whatever they want. And these are very long-term attacks, and this is probably not the only employee who was approached in this manner.
If I may add one more thing about phishing. So obviously, teaching everybody, how to be very mindful about phishing is very important. But I tell you, this can, based on many researches, maybe decrease the percentage of people not touching suspicious emails from 30-something% to 10%. It's still not enough. I'm happy there's not too many people in this room that I can admit that on Friday I got an email from DocuSign with a new contract. I almost signed it before thinking that it was actually fake. I don't know if somebody here sent it to me or not, but I can tell you this is dangerous. And so,
very funny, Manny. Very funny.
Nice try, though. And so, not only teaching the employees, you have to teach your entire organization, starting from playbooks to dealing with phishing attacks at the top, and then, of course, the SOC professionals on all the different phishing techniques, MITRE techniques, and I think in particular, working on all those cybercrime groups like Lazarus, APTs, these are things that needs to be trained because they change their techniques, but their signature is very similar, and the more you train, the more you're ready.
Just on the back of that, though, on the people not reporting as much because you're going through it, we gamify it as well. So we offer incentives for employees. The top reporter gets $500 a month if they report in. You're not just clicking everything. Then it's got to be proper, good quality stuff that you're reporting in. But you can get rewards for it as well.
It's like
which keeps people going.
Bounty program.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Ubiquity. This is a company that makes communication devices, and it's the biggest company in the world in this field. And they had an attack. Their source code, a lot of their source code was stolen from their GitHub. Cybersecurity blogger Brian Krebs reported a source who participated in the response who said the company massively downplayed a catastrophic incident to minimize the hit to its stock price. This article actually hit the stock price. I think it was around $4 billion, something like that. And eventually what happened is that this guy that you see on the right is the hacker who was also the source, who was also an employee of the company, who was also in the response team. So the company later sued. They couldn't say anything in real time because it was an ongoing investigation. But eventually, they sued Brian Krebs, who later retracted his story and said he did not realize that this was the case. And this is the insider threat,
which is probably the hardest problem any organization can face, right? Because essentially all your defenses are defeated from within. So what organizations have to think about is, how do you model a threat from within? And that's extremely challenging for most organizations. And I think in the case of Ubiquity, there's a crisis communications issue there as well, which is absolutely essential. So the way we tend to break it down is we have the different audiences that are going to have to be addressed by the cyber crisis management team, but it's a massive issue. And in that case, sometimes you get the time to communicate clearly with internal employees about what's happened, communicate with your customers, communicate with the media, the regulators. But in this case, it was flash to bang in rapid time, which is extremely challenging.
Yes, and I think insider threat indeed is a very, very difficult type of attack. When we run those type of exercises, we see that actually people have to use some other means. You cannot get any alert from the SIEM or anything like that. You need to master your digital forensic capabilities. You need to be able to actually investigate memory and files on endpoints. You need to be very, very careful about looking on the timeline about how the attack is being moving forward, because at the end of the day, unlike the external type of attacks here, you want to incriminate the person that actually was behind it. And so it's a little bit like a police investigation. You need to be very, very careful with all your findings to build the case against whoever was behind that attack.
Yeah, just to add that, for a company that does communication, their communication wasn't great on the actual part where they'd been hacked. And we heard earlier today that it really does help with the mitigation, with trying to get your company back up and running afterwards. Communication is key.
A lot of times when you have a hacker, you have to think about what you're doing, how you're responding to the attack is affecting the hacker, because sometimes the hacker is still in the system and can see what you're saying, what you're writing in emails, what you're doing with your system. And when you have an insider who does that, and especially if that insider is on the team that is supposed to investigate the response, this is a very, very hard situation, and this is something that you have to take into account. It does exist. It happens more than once. I've seen many cases like this, and make sure that you have different people who you trust, and that you don't trust one person with everything, and that you don't have one person who can delete or this guy changed the log retention feature. definitions. So the logs were not retained more than 24 hours, which was making it harder to find him. And if somebody changes something like that, this should be a big red flag. Why did this person do it, and why was anybody doing it anyway, and why was it possible to do it without having alerts all over the place? T-Mobile. Hackers stole data of 30 million T-Mobile customers and asked for 6 Bitcoin, which was $270,000 at the time. T-Mobile asked for, hired a third party to investigate and negotiate with the hackers. They first paid $50,000 to taste the information to see if it's really theirs. And once they realized it was, they paid the full amount of $200,000 for exclusive rights to the data. What happened is that the hackers didn't hold their part of the deal and did sell the information to other parties, to criminals, I guess, or whatever. And the other thing is that the company didn't say that didn't report that it bought the information, but this was exposed in a different case where the forum where the information was sold was raided and the owner was indicted. And it came up that the company actually paid through a third party. So this is negotiation and ransom paying.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we like to do when we do simulations with boards is get them to think through the consequences of negotiating with an attacker. So there are some advantages to doing it in the sense that you can draw out the timeline, but increasingly it's important for organizations to consider the potential legal ramifications of doing that, especially as regulatory bodies and law enforcement start to up their game with sanctions, for example. So it's always a consideration for the board when you get involved in a ransomware case to factor that into your decision-making cycles.
I mean, it comes down to pay or not to pay, doesn't it? You know, and how much do you trust a criminal? And I think they are more trustworthy now, I think, because their business models are better. But, you know, it is a business decision at the end of the day whether you are going to pay a ransom or not, and you have to trust that they're going to come up with the goods.
So this is a case where the company trusted hackers. Usually, the police, the FBI, they recommend not paying, but sometimes there's no other way of getting the information or getting the key to decrypt the files. But we also know that hackers have a business model, and if the business model is getting ransom, they have to supply the services that they promised, or else this would not work on the long term. So you can't know about a specific hacker, but if this hacker belongs to a group that has the history of standing by its word and doing what it promised, this is one consideration you should take when you negotiate and pay ransom. The other one is, of course, what are the ramifications, the legal and public ramifications? The company made itself like a target. We pay for stolen information. So this could happen again. Thank you very much. Thank you to all our panelists.
Thank you very much, everybody. That concludes our conference. It was a pleasure for the third year to partner with Cyber Week and to have the opportunity to ask the questions about what does it mean to have a cyber crisis management plan? What does it mean to be cyber crisis ready? And to have with the experts, and a lot of companies around in Israel that have the expertise on cyber crisis management, to help organizations and to help CISOs get organizations better prepared. Hope to see you again next year. And tomorrow, Manny Barzilai, Master of Ceremony for Cyber Week. See you again. Thank you so much.